Okay, hello guys, and welcome back to part 2 of the classes notes. So we're going to talk about just some more features and things you could do with classes that I think will be pretty useful. So here we have the person class, kind of like you did for homework, and here you have your driver class, where I already made some objects with some of your favorite teachers at heart. Okay, now one of the questions you might have been asking is, and some of you have been asking, is can I make an array of person objects? And the answer, of course, is yes. Just like you made an array of strings or booleans or doubles or an array of arrays for 2D arrays, you could do the same thing here. So person teachers, let's say we set up a new array of 3 person objects. And if you've already created them, you can set them up like this. So I can set teachers of 0 to be Mr. Gravel. I can set up teachers sub 1 to be Miss Smith. And I can even set up another teacher like this. So teachers sub 2 equals, and I could just create a new person here. So I can create a new person to store in my array. So I can create a new person. What teacher do we want to put in here? Let's say Mr. Vincent. So John Vincent. Okay, Mr. Vincent is my age, so he's 22. Excellent. So that is how you can set up an array of teachers. You can either put objects in that you created or create one there. Okay, now you might be wondering, what would you do with this? Well, you could have a method, just like a method could input a person. You could have a method input an array of persons. So you could do something like, public static, let's say int, and then count Johns. And what this does is this inputs an array of persons, and then it returns how many people in here are named John. So the input is an array of person objects, returns a count of how many have first name of John. Okay, so let's see, how would we go about this? How would we kind of think through this and loop through it? Well, okay, I need to set up some kind of count. All right, and now let's go ahead and loop through. So for int I equals 0, I is less than peeps.length. It's an array, so there's no parentheses there. Okay, and then I'll just need to look at object I. So I look at peep sub I, which is a person. Okay, so I'm going to say if peep sub I, so that's a person. So I'm going to see if their first name, if that first name is John. Okay, and if so, then I'll add 1 to the count. And then, of course, after this method, I'll just go ahead and return the count. So this is saying, okay, we have this array of people. We're accessing element I. That's a person object. Then I call the method on that object and then compare. So here's my person. Now I get the first name of the person, which is a string, and I see if that string is equal to John. Okay, so if I want to set this up and test it out, it's going to be tough to do that through BlueJ, but I think I could do it through the main like usual. So I'm going to call my count Johns, and I'm just going to send it this list teachers. So that's going to take this list of person objects, call it down here, set the peeps equal to teachers, and loop through and do what we have. So hopefully when we run this, we get 1 John in the list, and that is in fact exactly what we see. Okay, so that's how you can create an array and call a method with those. Let's go ahead and talk about some more features that we might want. What if you want to print out, not just like a method or anything, but what if you want to print out an individual teacher? Like, I feel like Mr. Gravel has probably been doing a great job. So let's see if we can print him out to acknowledge that. So we can say, my fave teacher is, and then we're going to print out Mr. Gravel. Okay, now, as you might expect, or maybe as you don't expect, this is not going to work very well. And when you call this method, it gives you something like that. Well, gee, that kind of looks something like what we saw with arrays, right? We had a person object, but it just printed out this random gobbledygook memory location. Okay, now, you might at first be upset with this, but I have some good news for you. So the bad news is, this just prints out the memory location where this is stored. So what's happening here is somewhere in memory, you've created some objects, right? So you set up here, you have one object, you have a person, which you call A, and that's where you have Nick Gravel. He's like 24 or whatever. And then you have some person, which is B, and that's where you store Miss Smith, and her age is 23. So all it's doing is it's telling you what the memory location is where you're storing Mr. Gravel. Now, the good news is, is that you can change this. You can change this to show, maybe you can change this to show whatever you like when you print out a person object. So we just need to add a method in person, and that method is a special method named tostring. So let's go back here. So now at the bottom of my person, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in another method here. Okay, so this looks ugly, so let's auto layout it. So let's go ahead and add a method. So it's going to be public string tostring. And most of the methods don't matter, but this is a special method that Java is going to be looking for. So what this is, this special tostring method, it must take no inputs and must return a string. So the printing doesn't actually happen here. Basically, when you try to print out an object, it prints out whatever this method returns as a string. So when I try and print this out, it's going to look for a method called tostring in here, and it's going to call it automatically. So I don't need to call like a.tostring. If I just try and print out a, it's going to call this tostring method. And you get to decide what a person prints out as. So if you just want all people to print out the same, you can do that. You could just return like all people are the same. That's fine. Like if you just want to live in some egalitarian society where all people are the same, whether we print out Mr. Gravel or Miss Smith, they're all going to print out the same. So it says my favorite teacher is, and then this is it calling the tostring method and printing out whatever it returns. Now, that's not actually that useful, especially if you're trying to like test your code. What would probably be better is what if you set up some kind of string using the instance variables. So set up a string using the instance variables. So maybe I'll set up some string. So this will be my output, and that'll be a new string. And let's say I want to use, okay, the first name plus, and then I'll put a space in, and then plus the last name variable. And then again, you get to add features and embellish as much as you want. Plus I'll put in a space, and then age, and then I'll put in the age like that. Okay, and then again, I need to return that string. So what's happening here is each individual variable has their own first name and last name, right? So when I call tostring on person A, it's going to return Nick Gravel 24. When I call tostring on person B, it's going to return Catherine Smith 23, because those variables have those values there. Okay, so let's go ahead and print that out then, and we'll see now when I just printed that out. So when I tried to just print out A and print out B, it is automatically prints out what the tostring returns for that variable. So basically what it does is it calls a.tostring automatically. This is built into println. And then it prints out what that method returns. So you just have to add in this tostring method. It's not already given. If you don't write this method, it'll just automatically do the instance variable. So if you don't write tostring, it automatically prints out the instance variable. Not the instance variable, sorry, the memory location that we saw with arrays. So it's almost like an array is actually a type of object. Interesting. Okay, so let's go from here. One more thing I want to talk about. Let's make some clones. So let's make some people. Let's make a couple different Vincents, right? So let's make a person P1 equals Mr. Vincent, and let's make a person P2 also equals Mr. Vincent, still 22. So let's go ahead and add some statements. Let's try to compare people. So to compare people, can we use equals equals? That might be a question you have. So basically, does P1 equals P2? Okay, and if so, we're going to print out they are equals equals. Okay, and one thing we're going to see, and hopefully you can make your guess right here, is that just like with arrays, if we run this code and see if we can find it here, there we go, see if we can find it here, it did not print anything out. So the equals equals does not do anything. Okay, so equals equals does not work for comparing objects. Okay, so what do we do with an object before, like a string? Oh, there was a dot equals method, but do I have a dot equals method? No. Can I write a dot equals method? Yes. Okay. So this will always return, not always, but basically this does not work. Even though they are the same, Java doesn't really know how to compare them. But you can compare person objects or any type of objects using dot equals, but just like with the tostring, you must write the dot equals method. Okay, so you must write that in the person class. All right, so this is another special method right here. So the equals method, oops, what is going on here? All right, so the equals method will input another person and return a Boolean. Okay, so it's going to look like this. It's going to be public Boolean equals, and I'm going to return, I'm going to input another person. We'll call them other. Okay, now just like with tostring, you get to decide what this looks like if two people are equal. So you get to decide what it means for two people to equal each other. Okay, so you might be wondering, well, where is the first person? Well, basically what's happening is I will call a dot equals b. So basically what you're doing is you're comparing the instance variables inside A, just like if you call a.getName, it uses A as instance variables. You're comparing the instance variables inside A, so that's like the same first name, the last name, and the age, just with the current object. So that's like the current object. To B, which is the other input. Okay, so it's the input called other. So what you're going to do is, again, you get to decide. So we might say, okay, if two people have the same name, we'll just say they're equal. So we're going to say if this first name instance variable, if that equals, okay, and that's a string, so I need to use dot equals to compare the string. So I'm going to use dot, oh, whatever, I spelled that wrong, it's fine. So I'm going to use dot equals to compare compare string, and equals to compare age. So maybe I'll just say if the first name is equal to the other dot get first name, and my age, so my instance variable age, which is an int, is equal to the other dot get age. Okay, and if those are the same, then in that case I'll return true, and otherwise, in that case, I'll return false. Okay, so in this case, we're comparing the first name, which is a string. So that's why we use dot equals, because that's how we compare a string. And age, which is an int. Okay, so that's what's going on here. You might be a little confused, like, well, which first name is this talking about? So basically, when you call a dot equals b, A is the object you are calling this on. So what that means is the first name and the age refer to A. Now, if I called b dot equals A, the first name and the age would refer to B. So let's go ahead and look at an example. We'll see this compiles. Let's look at an example of how this will look like. So we wrote the method. It inputs another person's in the person class. So I'm going to have to call something like this, but I'll use dot equals. So I'll say if p1 dot equals p2, then in that case, I'll just go ahead and print out they are dot equals using what I wrote. So let's go ahead and work through this and think about this. Okay, so when I run this code, we'll see it is dot equals. That did print out. So basically what's happening is when I do p1 dot equals p2, I call this method on p1 and I send it p2 as the other. So I'm going to this method. I'm saying, okay, p1 is when I did p1 dot. So the first name and the age, those are p1s. p2 is the other. So I compare other and the other's first name. Ooh, that's not what I wanted to do. The other's first name and the other's age, I'm comparing those to the current object's first name and the current age. And again, I can flip that. So that's how this is working. You're comparing the current object you're working with to the input. So basically, if you're sitting in here, you're saying, okay, you have some equals method, and this equals method is inputting some other person. So if you call a dot equals b, you're sending it, and this is in here, you're sending it this other object as the other, and you're comparing that other object to the instance variables inside this person class. That's what's going on right there. Anyway, okay, so that's how the dot equals works, and that's how you're going to write it. It's kind of like that total age. You're comparing the total or the instance variables of this object to the ones of the other one. Okay, the only other thing I want to talk about was a special keyword. So there's a special keyword called this. It's optional. You might have noticed, by the way, that this lights up in Java. You might have seen that. It just means it has a special meaning. Today we'll talk about it. The this keyword is totally optional and is something you can use to refer to the current object you are in. So if you call like a.methodName, well, inside there, a is this. If you call a.equals_b, so you're calling a method on b, then a is this, what this is referring to. And of course, if you call b.equals_a, then now b is what this refers to. So what you do is it just is a way to label variables / methods. So if you're getting confused by like, well, which one are we talking about? What you could do is you could option say, okay, I'm going to do this dot first name and this dot age. And that's a reminder that you're comparing like this current object's first name to the current object's, to the other object's first name, the current object's age to the other object's age. And again, it's optional. You saw it compiled and worked without it. Don't feel like you need to do that. But you can use, like, same thing in the total age. So if you're curious about like the current object using this, I can say, okay, I want o.getAge and compare that to this.age. So feel free to use that if it makes more sense to you. Okay, so that's this. Bring me some questions, class. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you soon.